Well, if you didn't know that it was draft season in the NFL, especially in the Pacific Northwest, you do now because it is Rob Staton season. Founded the Seahawks draft blog many years ago and has just proven himself since then to be the hardest working and really the smartest guy in the Seahawks draft analysis universe. And he has been a good friend of the show over the years. I got a lot to talk to him about today. He's got his horizontal board work made out. We're going to dig into that. And as the thumbnail and the title of the video suggests, we're going to focus on his sleepers, his day 3 guys in this draft. But I'm not going to not ask him about some of his favorite players at the top as well. And we have news to react to. We'll get his thoughts on the Jake Bobo news, as well as a couple other things coming up right after this. Rob Staton joining us today on this live edition of Seahawks Forever. Get your questions ready.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Good to see you guys. Welcome in. I'm Dan, and this is Seahawks Forever. If you're new to the show, I would appreciate it if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and also hit that subscribe button. Closing in now on 13,000 subscribers as the next milestone. Rob's been on the show a number of times over the years, and man, his profile continues to grow. You see him everywhere now. So lucky to have him back today and anxious to get him in here. He'll be joining us in just a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, if you would subscribe to the channel, it's the best way to help me out and get this video out in front of more people. And joining me now is from the Seahawks draft blog, Rob Staton, the busiest, the hardest working man. They used to call James Brown the hardest working man in show business. I'm going to call you the hardest working man in the Seahawks, content creator space. Man, you never get a rest.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's a busy old time. I have just got home from work, which was a lot later than I expected to. So I've jumped on. My computer needed to restart. So I'm sorry I'm a little bit late, Dan. But delighted to be here and ready to talk to you.
No worries. Fashionably late. Make the people wait a little bit. Then it just makes them more hungry. And the thing that I like to point out too, that I don't think a lot of your fans understand really, is that the draft stuff, the Seahawks stuff, is a passion project for you. It's a side gig. You're a reporter for the BBC, and that's what when you say going to work, that's what you're talking about. I'm not quite sure that they all know that out there. Hey, we've got news to react to today, like right off the bat. And this is one of those where there's the emotional part of being a fan and covering the game. There you go. Let's get you in there. There's the emotional part, and then there's the practical part. And we know what a fan favorite Jake Bobo is. We know what a favorite he is in that front office and among that coaching staff. But at, I think it's $3.547 million for a tender. He signs, or the Jaguars signed him to an offer sheet today. The Seahawks have to match that to avoid losing him. A guy that's essentially your wide receiver 5. Yeah, he's a great blocker in the run game, but he plays about 25% of the snaps at most. His special teams value is outstanding, but the Seahawks have been remarkably successful in retaining the bottom of their roster this offseason, and a lot of those guys are core special teamers. Your thoughts just on this move by the Jaguars and whether or not you think the Seahawks will match?
Well, the fact that they weren't going to tender him and then they did made it feel as if there was definitely some interest there. Mm-hmm. And then once they did put the tender on him, I think most people, I did assume that would be it. That whoever was interested would not come in with an offer sheet. And yet that's what's happened. I think it's going to be very hard to keep him at this point. He's 28 years old this year. You know, he was an older player coming into the league. He's pushing up towards 30. Like I said, he's a wide receiver 5. He is a useful player to have around, and he made some big plays at the end of the season. Like he suddenly burst onto the scene in the playoffs and at the end of the season, making some big plays. So it'll be a shame to lose him, but look, if the Jaguars want him that badly, then I think you have to take your hat off and say, look, if there's of all the positions, really, wide receiver 5 has to be one that you feel you can fill. You have some depth at this position. You've got some players on your practice squad who can come in, and some players that are around the roster. You've got a draft coming up that's deep at receiver. It's going to be really sad to see him go because, like you say, he's a fan favorite. He's a likable guy, but it looks like he's heading to Florida.
I just want to get your thoughts on this too. This came out today from Eric Edholm, who does some really good work over at the NFL Network. And we see these power rankings all the time, and then they always evolve, obviously, after we get through the first couple waves of free agency, and then we'll get these again after the draft. He came out with this one today, and he still had the Seahawks at the number 1 spot. Are you surprised by this?
No, I think really, if you're going to do a power ranking before we've even had the draft, I think you kind of have to lean towards the Super Bowl champions still being there. But a lot of people may say, well, the Rams caught the Seahawks up. I'm not having that at all. Like, okay, they've traded for one cornerback and they've signed another. Like the Chiefs, one, did not try and re-sign the cornerback that they allowed to leave in free agency.
Yeah.
And two, the cornerback that they've traded for is better in the slot, and they're going to try and play him outside. So, yeah, great. Like it's flashy moves. They look active. They've got the 13th overall pick. Matthew Stafford, statistically, over the last few seasons, that last year was an anomaly. Like, I don't know where that came from, because like his form was dipping year after year.
Mm-hmm.
He was getting hurt. The touchdown numbers were not great. And then all of a sudden he pulls out an MVP season. But assuming that he's going to be able to do that again, it's just as likely he gets another back or neck injury or something in week 3, and you do not see the same Matthew Stafford next year. Devontae Adams will be a year older. You've got players on that roster. There was a whisper doing the rounds this week that Puka Nacua is actually becoming a bit of a headache for the Rams in these contract negotiations. And he's had a very interesting, shall we say, last 6 months.
Yeah.
So you just wonder a little bit. Like, it's very easy to look at the Rams and go, oh, yeah, look how trendy the Rams are. I'm not so sure that I'm seeing that they've done enough to feel like they should overtake the Super Bowl champions. I think the biggest surprise for me is I don't think the Patriots are the 7th best team in the league. I don't think the Ravens are the 6th best team in the league. So I don't know why they're up there. I'm not even convinced the Broncos are the 3rd best team. Maybe that speaks to the quality of the NFL at the moment, that the Broncos are 3rd, because I don't think they're that good. So, I think the Seahawks should be number 1.
All right, we're going to get into some of your horizontal board stuff. This is always fun. But first, let's start this way. You kind of talk us through, especially for people that might be new to your work, talk us through your process, just sort of the timeline and how you arrive at this board.
Well, it's changed. As every year goes on, I tend to do more work than the last year. And it's almost become a little bit of something that I don't set out to do, but I always end up doing it. So this year I've actually written down more notes than ever. I tended to sort of watch players, and then I wouldn't necessarily know every player. A lot of it would just be in my head from studying stuff. I'd write articles, and then I'd link the articles with the names, so I could go back and read what I put in August. And I've actually just detailed everything this year. And I've got a document with tens of thousands of words in it, which I've been compiling since August last year. So the process is that usually in the summer I would start about June or July, start watching players. Day job was so busy I couldn't do that until August this time around. Got into it. I get a feel for what a draft class is within the first 3 weeks of college football season starting. Then add to the sort of building of the notes, seeing what players are doing, looking at the early prospects that have been touted by the media, because a lot of the people in the media who are at the front end know who the teams are looking at because they speak to them. So that's worth paying attention to. And then I start compiling the horizontal board earlier this year than I ever have done. So that was, I'd say, about 5 or 6 weeks into the college football season when it actually looked like something that was presentable, that was worth looking at. I've just built on that. There's over 200 players on that board now. I need to do another, I'd say about 30 to 50 players probably before it'll be finished. It is every single day I do something on the blog. So I do a full-time job for the BBC. And then every single day when I come home, I am either watching players, writing, or both, or doing streams like this, or doing my own streams. It is a legit full-time second job. It's for free. I don't charge anybody to read Seahawks Draft Blog. It is all free. Some people contribute to the running costs on Patreon, and I'm eternally grateful for that. But there's no adverts. There's nothing. It's just a passion project, a labor of love. I love the Seahawks. I love the draft. And if anybody's watching this who's not visited SeahawksDraftBlog.com before, all I would ask is that if you would give it a try, so that the more people reading the work makes it all the more worthwhile.
Very robust comment section as well. A lot of really passionate and smart fans have been drawn to your page. Now, when you put a player on your board, how much weight do you give to trying to identify Seahawky type people in addition to the player? Do you only put them on the board if you think they might meet the Seahawks criteria for the type of character they like, or do you whittle it down as we get closer to the draft?
No, I think for the purpose of the horizontal board, I just try and grade the players.
Okay.
And then what I've started to do is I can't interview the players. So I don't know exactly whether the Seahawks fits. When there are reported character concerns, I've started marking the players in purple. So if a reputable journalist, not just some random on Twitter, but if somebody who's actually a reporter or somebody who's in the draft sphere, a Todd McShay, let's say, would say that they've heard some concerns about a player's character or their work ethic or something, they go on purple on the board, which is what the NFL teams use. That's the color they use for that. If there's a reported injury history or a current injury, they'll go in red on the horizontal board, which is again what that's the color that the teams use for an injury. Now, the sort of the blue, I think it is for like really. I don't go down that road. I grade for the rounds, and I don't grade for the Seahawks. But consciously, I'm always looking. I watch interviews. One thing I do a lot is watch interviews to try and get a feel for who the people are. Yeah. And I don't have a million sources. I'm definitely not Todd McShay or Mel Kiper or anybody like that who can ring up 100 people in the league. But I do know people who are at teams in college football and who are in the NFL, and I can ask them for opinions off the record to get little bits of information sometimes, so I can sort of get an idea for who character-wise fits the Seahawks. And then just sort of the studying process, I think it's really interesting. Having done this now since 2008, I can tell you, Dan, you pretty much know very quickly, as in like a game, whether you're going to like a player or not. Like you sort of look at certain things. You do have to watch more than one game, but you get a feel very, very quickly as to, has this player actually got anything, or where am I thinking this player I'm going to end up with? Very rarely do you watch a game and think, I have got that completely wrong after 4 games. Like you can get a feel, you can see for certain things. And the way that has happened, it's just from asking different people over and over again, what do you look for at certain positions? And then once you get those answers from people who are far more qualified than I will ever be, it makes it easier. So you're not looking for things that don't mean anything. And that's whether that's testing, whether that's on the field performance, technique, it all helps you put a board together. And I do think this year in particular, I'm not just blowing my own trumpet. I get shit done wrong as well. But this year, I feel like we've talked about players who have been very buzzy in the last month, but we were talking about them in October. So I'm quite happy about that. So I guess this is just a shameless plug for people to go and visit the blog and read all the stuff.
As they should. And I hope everyone that watches this will. And as someone who tries to do a little bit of what you do, I know how much work goes into it. So it's blows my mind. The consistency and the discipline that it requires is remarkable, especially when it's not your full-time gig. I do appreciate that you use purple to indicate potential problem players. As a WSU grad, I appreciate the choice of purple as that use. We've heard for quite a while that this is a down year for the draft. It's lacking in premium prospects, which really makes it, the kind of the buzzword we're hearing the most lately. It's just a weird draft. It's an unusual draft in that way. I've observed that we've lost most, not all, but we've lost most of the long-term COVID guys that are coming out older. So it's a younger draft, a lot of 21, 22-year-olds. And so, I've said that I don't necessarily think it lacks in talent, but it's a very unfinished draft. It's a lot of, it lacks in certainty. There's just a lot of raw projects in this draft. And I know that you're on record as saying that you've agreed with that assessment of the class as a whole and have for quite some time. How much more challenging did that make you to scout this class?
It made it less enjoyable, because typically you will discover players and you'll just have, one of the great fun things is to sort of watch somebody and think that's a first round player, or that's a player. Like, so one of the good examples, positive examples from this class was watching Dylan Thieneman during the season and sort of seeing what he was capable of doing. And then it's been great to sort of, when you watch him at the combine and think this is one of the best combine performances I've ever seen, and to sort of think that's matched up from what we were saying, in November about this player, and, to have him very early on the horizontal board as a potential first round pick, and then to sort of see that he's now like a consensus first rounder. That's what you do it for. Those kind of moments where you see somebody and you think, yeah, And this year, the problem is that there was a whole bunch of players that the sort of national media were chucking out there going, this guy, this guy, this guy. And then you'd watch the tape and you think, I don't see it. I don't understand like what's going on here. Like, why is this player getting talked up? And then as the games were going along, so I'd say like about a month into the season, you could already see, I understand what's going on now. It's not a very good draft. And they're reaching, they're looking for the players who can fill the void. And there just weren't any. And as the quarterbacks were just getting more and more disappointing, and they were kind of dissipating, and it was never realistic that Arch Manning was going to declare, but there were some other players that people were really expecting to do well that didn't take that next step. They disappeared. There was a lot of these pass rushers have just got flaws. Like, they're flawed players. Like, they're not complete players, whether that's body type, speed, arm length, production, whatever it is. Like, there's something, run defense. Nearly all of them have got some kind of fatal flaw that otherwise would send a player down the board. And like, we're talking about some of these players being top 15 picks now, or top 5 picks, even in the case of David Bailey, who's not without flaws, and people are acting like he's Von Miller. He's not. So you've got all that stuff going on. And then you just sort of look through it. And when you kind of, I've saved all of the horizontal boards, and you kind of look at them and you see the ones where I zoom out and you can't see the names, but you can see just the sort of the areas where there are positions. And the thickness, for example, in the last draft compared to the thickness in the top end on this one is so noticeable. And you have got a lot of players in this draft who are in that very bottom end, sort of that day 3 or later round range. And a lot of those players are going to end up going like round 4. And I think when we get to, it's going to be one of the worst day 3s I think we've had, because there are going to be some familiar names there, and people are going to go, oh, what a steal. We got this guy in day 3. And it's like, yeah, because he's not very good. He's just been touted. He's been hyped up. And I have no issue. I had no issue with the Rashid Shaheed trade for this, because I thought, you know what? Screw it. Like 4th, 5th round pick. They might be priority free agents for you in this draft. So I had no problem with that whatsoever.
Yeah. And Schneider was, open about that's exactly the reason they were willing to part with those picks. As much as you can, do you try to just draft for that class, or do you try when you decide where to slot a guy, by round? Do you also try to compare it to other years, better years?
I don't, because I think if I was, working for a team, and God help any team that would have us, but if I was, I would definitely be thinking of that. But I think for the blog, I do it year by year. Like, what is this draft class about? Like, my sort of main aim with it is, one, I like doing it. So I like to learn who the players are, and I like college football. I am wearing an Alabama hat. That's purely because I saw it and I like it. Like, I have Washington State, I have Washington Husky, I have Florida Gators hat, I have a UCF hat. I've got a Miami Hurricanes hat. I've got a lot of different hats. I like to wear hats. People who watch the stream will know that. But I don't have a team. But I like college football. So this gives me a purpose to, like, what are the games that I've got on British TV this week? Okay, I've got this, and this. Okay, which players can I go and watch? I can watch this guy, and I can watch that guy. And then my whole weekend is taken up by fitting in like the 10 games that are available to me on DAZN, and then being able to go and watch all of the players that I can do. And then every now and again, you see a player and you think, wow, that's amazing. Like, I really like that guy. And I want to write something about him. I want to put him in the horizontal board in round 1 or round 2. And that's what it's about. It's about sort of my enjoyment of the draft and sort of tapping into that. 2, creating talking points, and also I have to say, Dan, and I'm not naming names or anything like this, and certainly I do not have all of the answers. Like, I get stuff wrong. People always remember the stuff you get wrong, by the way. They never no one ever runs on and goes, hey Rob, that guy that you really liked, he had a great career. Like, no one ever does that. But if you get one thing wrong, people keep bringing it up all the time. So I definitely don't get all the things right. But I have to say, Dan, there is so much bollocks that is said about the draft, from especially at this time. Like, what you've got is like the mainstream media all of a sudden all know about the draft, like, because it's the only thing to talk about. Free agency's come and gone. Everyone's talking about the draft now, and it gets worse as you go along. And you just think, my God, this is just garbage half the time. Like, there's so much rubbish spouted from people who jump on at the end. And it is the most frustrating period, because when you've spent so much time studying stuff and you get an angle for things, and then people come along and tell you how it is, and you just think, nah, that's, where were you in November watching Western Michigan tape? Like, you weren't there. And like, now you're going to tell me this guy's a first round lock? Like, it becomes very, very difficult. So what I want to do is give people a proper, accurate flavor of what the draft is. And I think if nothing else, we've kind of done that over the years.
You touch on something that is a pet peeve of mine, and just recently it kind of came up. There's a guy on Twitter, won't name names, and he does this full time. He puts a lot of effort into it. He builds boards and guides and writes profiles, and he's got a decent following, and he works at it. But and maybe this was just his way of trying to attract a little bit more audience. He called Daniel Jeremiah out the other day, literally because he had a player going earlier in his mock than he thought he deserved to go. And it wasn't that he disagreed. That's fine. We want that, but he called it, he said, I don't know if I can take Daniel Jeremiah seriously anymore. Those are his exact words, which is I replied to him on Twitter and I said, listen, what you're saying goes against everything we should be focusing on for the draft. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of groupthink out there. And that brings along with it a fear of going against the grain and of ranking a guy much too high, even if you have a conviction about it because you don't want the backlash. But that's everything we want, right? We should encourage people to be honest about their assessments, even if they don't match up with the consensus.
Well, one of the things that I've quite enjoyed recently is the Todd McShay show, because
isn't he so much better, like outside of ESPN? Like he's so much more comfortable. Filter. He gets to do his hair and wear his hoodies or whatever. I love his content more than I ever did.
Yeah, and totally unfiltered and saying whatever he wants. And obviously he and Steve Mensch are very close and have known each other since college. And yet I'm sat there this morning having my breakfast, watching them have an absolute tear up about Drew Aller. And I'm sat there thinking, this is kind of great content. Like this is really good because they've got very strong opinions and they're having it out and they're discussing it and it's out there. And they both have very different takes. And you're absolutely right. That's how it used to be. Like when I started doing the Seahawks Draft Blog, like I can remember there was many. With the day job that I do a lot of driving. I have to drive to games, soccer games in England, and do commentaries and broadcasts. And there were many a game where the Mel Kiper and Todd McShay podcast would get me on a 2-hour drive, let's say, and they would just fight and argue like an old married couple on that, and it was fantastic. And then for some reason, I don't know when it happened. I can't pinpoint an exact year, but all of a sudden that stopped happening. They stopped arguing. And people stopped having disagreements, and it all became very, like you say, groupthinky. And now I feel like every mock draft's the same. Like every mock draft has the same players in the same positions. There's very little out there thinking. And as soon as anybody puts their head above the parapet, they're told that they're insane, or they've got mental health issues, or that they can't be taken seriously anymore. And it is discouraging. Like really, what we want are people to. The draft is unpredictable. Think of all the things that have happened over these. Who saw Mitch Trubisky? We'll trade up one spot to take Mitch Trubisky. That was never going to happen in a million years, and it happened. The Dolphins taking Deion Jordan instead of Lane Johnson. Stuff like that. There's all sorts of stuff going on that you just don't expect. You never see EJ Manuel being drafted in the middle of the first round. If someone 3 weeks before the draft had put EJ Manuel at 16th or 15th overall, or wherever he went to the Bills, they would have got hammered online. And yet that would have been the most inspired mock draft that year. I completely agree with you. You've got to be prepared to think outside the box, and particularly with mocks, try ideas, suggest things. Let's have a debate about mocks. People are taking them too seriously.
And one point of debate that I want to get into with you, and we'll talk about some players now. I could talk about the process of scouting and doing this for hours, but we'd probably lose all the viewers. You and I can have that conversation later, another time over a pint. Let's do this though, because just piggybacking off what you just talked about, the most trouble I could get into at any given moment on Twitter is suggesting that they use their first pick in the draft, whether it be 32 or 38 or 39. Those are some typical trade back targets for me, to take a running back. Jadarian Price is typically the one that goes there. Some fans would prefer Mike Washington. I don't think that's where he fits on the board. And so I use Price as the example. I think he's the best fit. And that seems to be a range. In fact, a lot of the national mock drafters now, the national analysts, the big name guys, are starting to put him in there. The Seahawks just did their mock draft roundup today on their website, and 4 guys had Price going early. But I've suggested that, and I get skewered. My argument has been that while I understand the concept of positional value, in this draft class, and particularly for this team with this roster and their needs and where they're picking, you throw that out the window, don't you? And just take the best player at that spot.
I agree because the way I've been sort of talking about this draft is I think it's a draft full of one contract players. I think people look at every draft class as if every pick, let's say in the first 3 rounds, maybe even some people think beyond that, has to be sort of seen as, well, it's a failure if this player leaves in 4 or 5 years. That you are not acquiring the services of an individual for 4 to 5 years. You are trying to find someone who's a 10-year player. And they are so rare. Like, people may look back and go, well, the Boye Mafe was a bad pick and Ken Walker was a bad pick because you only...
I'll take it a step further. For years, Schneider got creamed because not enough of his high draft picks were signing second contracts. But isn't it better to recognize that player's not worth a second contract?
It's not even so much that. Like, there's nothing wrong. Like, this is an argument I've been trying to make for about 5 years. There's absolutely nothing wrong with drafting somebody, them having a great 4 or 5 years with you, but you just ultimately get priced out of the next contract, or you have other things that you need to do, or whatever it is. There can be many reasons why a player doesn't re-sign for your team. If they move on somewhere else or you trade them, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, the Seahawks are going to get something back for these players because they're protecting the compensatory picks. If value just goes through the roof, look at Tyler Linderbaum. Like, I bet the Ravens had no desire whatsoever to let him walk out the front door. But the minute that people are going up to his age at the combine, going, we'll give you $25 million a year. Like, what do you have to do? Well, we're going to completely blow up the center market. And by the way, we're going to try and trade for Max Crosby or sign Trey Hendrickson. And we've got a quarterback who is going to want a new contract soon. We can't do it anymore. We're going to have to get cheaper at center. And we're going to have to let him walk out the door. That's not a bad pick. Like, the Ravens got 4 great years out of Tyler Linderbaum and would have had a 5th great year if it wasn't for the franchise tag being an arse and lumping centers in with left tackles. So it's difficult. Like, you've got to view, in my opinion, this draft class in particular as a bunch of players who very likely will be one contract players that are not going to be players that the Seahawks, especially at 32. Like, if you draft Arvell Reese, you're going to hope he's more than a one contract player. Sure. If you're the last pick in round 1 or further back down, you've got to look at this and go, we might get this player for 4 years. Who's going to come in and provide impact during our championship window, which we are in right now, to help us win another one next year? And I'm afraid the position that gives you the most bang for your buck right off the bat, week 1 this season, is running back. So if you think that Jadarian Price can pick up the slack left by Ken Walker, you are duty bound to consider drafting him. Now, they may not. Some people like Jadarian. Lance Zierlein thinks he's the 30th best player in the draft. Daniel Jeremiah thinks he's the 40th. Todd McShay thinks he's a late 2nd rounder. Steve Mensch thinks he's a 3rd rounder. Brian Broadus thinks he's a 3rd rounder. Like, there's a lot of different opinions on him. Sure. But if the Seahawks think this guy can run as part of the committee and be that sort of explosive, dynamic element compared to the thumpers we've got, they have to consider it. Doesn't mean that they're going to do it. Sure. But they have to consider it.
With that one contract focus in mind, then I imagine that you don't bat an eye at an older prospect, right? If an Akeem Mesidor slips to 32, there are some fans who will really push back at the idea of taking, I think he's going to be 25 on draft day if he's not already. It doesn't matter. If all you're looking at is maximizing now, he's physically more developed, right? There's probably not as much projection left. You're buying the floor more than the ceiling, but he could probably contribute earlier.
Well, yes, he's an interesting one because with Akeem Mesidor, he's had surgery on both feet. First and foremost, that's a problem. You will have to do medical checks. There is at least a chance that the medicals will send him a little bit down the board. I don't know. I don't have the doctor's records. Teams will check on that at the combine. He has not done any testing. Now, the reason he's not done any testing is, I think, for 2 reasons. One, when he was at West Virginia, he played at 280 pounds. And he played inside. They kicked him inside. And he's transferred to Miami, and now he's an edge. And he's lost about 20 pounds. And he's, when you are naturally 250, let's say, and a speed rusher, and you were a speed rusher the day that you walked through the doors at college, and you maybe put on 10, 20 pounds of muscle, but you're still, we've all seen like the pass rushers with the 6-pack, and they're just, that's who they are. They look like Brian Burns, let's say. Right. They've just got a little bit bigger. If you're that, you're a natural athlete. You go out there, It's another day of the week for you. When your weight's going up, down, up, down, up, down all the time, and you've maybe lost weight to play for Miami, you've not spent that same, like you might have spent 2 years at West Virginia just eating food to get into a bigger body. Like that's not conducive. You're not been doing a lot of sprints because you're burning calories.
I'm living in West Virginia currently, and all anyone eats here is fast food.
So he probably did a fair bit of that, and probably was not in sprinting shape, and then has spent it's a bit of time in Miami here, and has then had to change his body, and then maybe he feels I'm at a disadvantage, like running next to the guy who's 250 who's sprinted every day for the last 5 years or 4 years, and then the other thing with him is the age is interesting because he's a grown man. He's playing 18, 19-year-olds in college. Now, how do you watch his tape?
That's good.
Do you balance out the fact that this guy should be winning a lot of these battles, especially when he's playing freshman, sophomore, offensive linemen, of which you do tend to have some. There is a tendency in the SEC and the ACC and not so much in the Big Ten, but in those in the other two that I mentioned there, and the Big 12, you get a nice 5-star, 4-star offensive. They're playing. They're not sitting on their ass for 4 years, 3 years to get to wait. They're playing. So you were playing some young tackles, and he'll have the lunch money, and you have to kind of balance that out. So he's a player who could easily last to round 2, and it won't be because the tape's bad. It's because of the circumstances. But you're absolutely right. If you're clear with the medicals and you think age is not a reason why he succeeded, he is somebody who you get in, let's say, one contract, rush the passer.
And then how do you try to reconcile lower levels of competition? I think about a guy like Malachi Lawrence, who might have in an edge class that's considered deep, but lacks all around talents. Like they're all kind of leaving you wanting more. They're all kind of lacking something. He might have the most complete physical profile in this draft, at least as far as the guys that have some explosive traits. And yet he played at UCF his entire career, turned down NIL money to stay there, chose the Shrine Game over the Senior Bowl. How do you try to project that to the next level?
So I think first of all, you would just watch the tape. And if the player does not play well against lower level competition, it's a flag. And if they play reasonably well, fair play. I'm not gonna say I would expect more from him against that kind of competition. He's playing well. He's playing well. I'm not gonna knock him for that.
Does he have to dominate though?
No.
Okay.
If he dominates, then great. But in a weird way, that makes it worse because if he dominates, you might be tempted to say he's only dominating because of the competition. He kind of probably the sweet spot's probably just shy of domination. It's just playing really well, and then you can just sort of go, yeah, okay. The thing with Malachi Lawrence is there's so many positives. Like I know I've got some testing data from the season, not from the Shrine or the Senior Bowl, some GPS data, and he was his max speed was faster than anybody else. Right. So you think of all the other pass rushers, his max speed faster than anybody else, and you can sort of see that, like his explosive testing, unbelievable. You watch the tape, he can probably get around the edge quicker than the rest. Problem is his change of direction, he's off balance, and that there's too many snaps where when he does try to bend round the arc, having got to the outside shoulder first, and he tries to bend, he slips, and he hasn't quite got that ankle flexion, which will enable him to turn the corner. And once you lose balance, it's over. Like it's especially going to be over in the NFL. Like if every time you try to bend the arc, you're falling over or you're tripping up a little bit, you'll just get pushed over. So that's something that does worry me a little bit. Like the tools are all there. I don't know how you train on that. And I don't know whether he turned down the Shrine Bowl or at the Senior Bowl, or whether he just ended up at the Shrine Bowl instead. Which is a lesser event. No offense to the Shrine Bowl, but it is. And I just wonder if there's kind of like a mixed view on him as to like, wow, look at this profile. But maybe there are just a few things on tape, which mean, for me, how I would view Malachi Lawrence is I would say I would very happily take him with the 55th pick.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd take him with the 25th pick.
Yeah. I gotcha. We're going to talk about running backs in a minute. We're going to get to the day 3 stuff and the sleepers. I'm just, I always love chatting it up with you about this. But before we do, I want to talk about a running back that's not going to be a sleeper. And just another process question. We've talked about, lower level of competition, overaged guys. a guy like Mike Washington Jr. at Arkansas, who is every fan's favorite right now, and you can see why. I mean, just the tape is fun to watch. He's just such a smooth glider. He's huge, and then they see what he does at the combine, and everybody starts to drool. But really, only 1 year of production. And I got into this the other day with someone who it was the same guy who questioned Daniel Jeremiah, by the way.
Maybe how the finest guy is.
Maybe
you need to DM me after.
I'll tell you off air. Maybe you can guess. Anyway, he hates Mike Washington, and for that reason. And I tried to say, look, he said, tell me why at lower levels of competition, I think it was Buffalo and then New Mexico State, right? 3 years at Buffalo and then a year at New Mexico State, why he wasn't productive there, and then all of a sudden he's productive as last year. And I said, I don't know, development, progression, right? A guy just getting better at what he does. And oh, by the way, he did it. The 1 year of production came at a much higher level of competition. But there are, I just use him as an example, but there's a lot of guys in this draft that just kind of had the one big breakthrough year. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I think the league is full of players like that who you have kind of had to make a call on. I'm trying racking my brain now because there'll be one that pops into my head soon. Who the kind of the 1 year wonder, kind of player.
We see it with quarterbacks a lot, but it happens with other positions too. It just doesn't get as much attention.
But players who just sort of, you could even suggest, this is kind of an extreme example, but how does someone like Cam Ward go from someone who, I was at the Apple Cup in his final year at Washington State. And if you'd have told me after that game, you have just watched the 2025 number 1 overall pick, I'd have pissed myself laughing. Like, there's no way that was true. And then he goes to Miami and looks like a totally different player. And you have to kind of think in your head, hang on a minute. So is this development? Is this suddenly you're playing for the Miami Hurricanes with a load of NIL money in the ACC instead of playing for Washington State without the NIL benefits, and you're playing in a Pac-12 at the time that started some good teams? The Huskies went to the national championship that year that he was playing them in the Apple Cup. So what is it? And he comes to the NFL and he's played well. And you could easily sort of say 1 year wonder, but he's shown something there. I mean, he does also look like he's eaten half the cheeseburgers in Tennessee this offseason, I have to say, when he was modeling that uniform. But by the by, he had a good rookie season and there's some promise there. Jaden Daniels was considered a day 3 pick going into his final year at LSU. I can remember scouting the first game of his final season at LSU when they played Florida State. I can't remember the Florida State quarterback's name. He's the one who had that really bad leg injury at the end of the season. He was a smaller quarterback.
Oh, yeah. Jordan Tyson. Something like,
I think he's right. His name was Jordan something.
Yeah, he retired last year because of
because of the injury. And I remember writing up that game because at the time we were kind of like looking at quarterbacks for the Seahawks. That feels like a long time ago now, and saying that the Florida State quarterback was much better than Jaden Daniels. And then from that game onwards, Daniels just went on a tear to the point that before the Apple Cup game I was talking about started, I was watching Texas A&M against LSU purposely to watch Jaden Daniels on my laptop in the press box, and Jerry Brewer came along and asked me what the score was because everyone was kind of interested in this Jaden Daniels character.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, that's how you go from nowhere to somewhere very quickly. So with Washington, it could be that he the light switched on. It could be that Bobby Petrino gave him some kind of great advice, with all his experience. I have to say, I am not going to knock Mike Washington for performing this last year for Arkansas, given how shambolic Arkansas were. They were just a disaster zone all season. Their defense couldn't play any football at all. They'd have struggled against anybody they played to stop opponents. They were often playing from behind. And I think you have to give him the benefit of the doubt for that he still had a decent season. There are not many players like him who come into the league.
Yeah.
And he's a very explosive, quick player. The fumbles are obviously an issue, but Dan, there's going to come a point in this draft where you're sat there on the clock. I'm not necessarily about the Seahawks, but somebody's going to be sat on the clock and they're going to be going, I've got to take a chance on this guy.
Yeah. I just this morning went back because from time to time I go back and forth on Washington. Sometimes I wonder if, he's not a hard cutter. He's not a dynamic cutter. And so in that respect, there's some other guys that I think that fit the outside zone thing a little bit better. But then I put on the Senior Bowl today. I just decided I was going to rewatch that. And he had a carry down inside in the red zone. If you recall, it was the one where he ends up getting carried by his offensive line down to about the 1 yard line. But he makes a really instinctive cut in traffic there, works off of the butt of his pulling blocker. And I thought, okay, there it is. I mean, that's dynamic enough, and it's instinctive, and he just seems to have a really good feel. He's fun to watch.
So just a thing to mention with him, he ran the same 40 that Devon Achan ran, except he weighs about 30, 40 pounds heavier than Devon Achan. Like that's something. Yeah. There's something there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into this a little bit. Let's get you back in here. It's a little small, I know, but I just kind of want to use it for for my purposes as much as anything. But let's stick with the running backs because while I have been pretty open about, when I take a running back first, I like the way the mock falls better. There's certainly the opportunity, or there's a possibility that somebody else is going to be higher on their board. They go a different way. With that being said, who are some of your favorite guys that you could see fitting into that rotation as a rookie that are day 3 at the running back position?
I really struggle with day 3 of the running backs in this class. I think really once you've got past Price, Washington Jr., and Emmett Johnson, there's really only one player that I'd be that interested in, and that's Nicholas Singleton. Yeah. Now, he obviously has had an injury at the Senior Bowl and a very disappointing 2025 season. It was mind-blowing how bad he was, and they kind of just phased him out at Penn State. That's all going to have to be looked into, researched. I'd be asking the coaching staff what happened there. Why did Katron Allen go from being Nicholas Singleton's support to vice versa? But he has got all of the traits and the qualities that you would look for in a potential lead runner. So he is somebody that if he lasted to the end of the round 3 or into day 3, that'd be very interested in. And then you sort of see these other guys on day 3. They're all kind of like Katron Allen just hasn't got the burst. Like for me, he's somebody that could have a role in the NFL as a nice complementary thumper, but there's a limitation there with him. Adam Randall was probably the most surprising tape that I actually watched, because when you hear this player converted from receiver to running back this year and plays for Clemson, who are not exactly a glass-eating team at any place, every part of their roster, to sort of see with how much physicality he ran with was very interesting. And he did not play like a converted receiver when he was running between the tackles and taking contact. The thing is with him is he is a 6'3" running back, and there are not many of those. And I think he is going to have to deal with certain challenges to his frame and playing style. I think he's intriguing. If you were to sort of say to me, is there anybody on this list that you've currently got listed on day 3, and I've got sort of 5 names there, he would be the one that I'm most interested in. Jonah Coleman, I've gone and done a piece on him recently. I think he slows into contact. I think he lacks burst. I think his lack of speed works in his favor when he gets to the second level, and it enables him to play with patience that's almost forced, because he can sort of see how things are developing, because he hasn't got that blazing speed. Often, if you have got the top speed, and Mike Washington does this, you just get your head down and you run straight into the nearest defender. Like if you don't have the vision and the patience, you won't max it. That's why Devon Achan's so freaking good, is that he's got the vision, the patience, and the speed. It's the complete package. But Coleman's got that forced patience because he hasn't got the speed. But again, I would have expected him. You look at him; he looks like Maurice Jones-Drew, and he doesn't play like him though. Like he doesn't break contact anywhere near as much as you would have thought he would do. Like when he's tough to bring down because he's slippery, slips through blocks because he's just so small. It's hard to get down and grab hold of him. But when he gets hit, he goes down, like really surprisingly easily. So bit of a question mark for me there with him. And then, Jam Miller's fine. Le'Veon Moss has got injuries, so I'm not going there. And then the later round guys, I'm not feeling any of them.
Yeah.
There's like Seth McGowan's massively explosive, most explosive running back in the class. Damon Claiborne's
hard,
fast. I thought the tape was bang average. There's just not a lot to get excited about there. I think you have to take a running back in the first 3 rounds.
Now, another guy in the first 3 rounds might be Emmett Johnson, and I just wanted to put this up there just to reply to this. I don't know what tape you're watching or highlights, Seal Man, or what game you happen to watch.
But, watching the right player.
But Emmett Johnson was 96th percentile last year for Nebraska in yards after contact. For a guy that's not the biggest, I'm really impressed with his contact balance.
Well, look, he had 741 yards after contact last season, which was third only behind Katron Allen and Jeremiah Love. So I don't think that's fair. I know I accept that his yards after contact are not very good. So I think he's something like a 2.95 yards after contact per carry. So it's not very good. I take that on board, but it's quite hard to sit here and say that Emmett Johnson it gets knocked over by a gust of wind when he's got the third most yards after contact in this running back class.
Some other guys at any position, really. Well, let's stick to what we have on screen here, because here's something I want to talk to you about. Last year at this time, there was only one thing we were all discussing, and that was the offensive line, in particular the interior offensive line. And I'm struck by, and Schneider even referenced it himself and called himself out on it, kind of a callback to all the fans yesterday on his weekly radio show he does this time of year, where he made the correlation that like running back is this year's guard. That, fans are questioning the plan, they're questioning the process and the approach. They're suddenly not trusting him, even though the stack of reasons to trust him is as high as you can imagine. It's almost like Jack and the Beanstalk, for crying out loud. And yet the concern is there. They're not done adding to the position, but just given what you just talked about we know they're probably going to draft one, regardless of who they take in this draft. Are you okay with the process to this point?
Yes. I mean, I think it's important for us as a Seahawks fan base to acknowledge that we've kind of got what we all wanted, or at least I did. Like, I wanted an offensive line that was actually being built for a change. Like, it felt like every year it was like, who's going to be the replacement guard? Who's going to be the replacement center? There was never any consistency there. You were never putting any like foundations down. And every single year there'd be a player down, like in round 1 or round 2, or even round 3 for that matter. You'd think, well, why didn't they just take him? Like, that feels like somebody that could have very easily sort of plugged in at center there, or guard. And then they go on and have a decent career for the Eagles or somebody. And you think, or the Chiefs. And you think, well, why didn't the Seahawks just do that? Like, this is not hindsight. Like, we talked about these players in the build up to, like, how hard can it be? Like, either we're just being exceptionally fortunate on Seahawks draft blog here, or the team they've not done a good enough job building up the line. And they've kind of committed to it now. And they've now got bookend tackles who are signed up for the long term. They've got a left guard who is going to be is contracted for at least another 4 years. And they will probably re-sign him if he carries on playing the way that he is. You've got a center who looks like this is going to be the big challenge for the NFL now. I don't think anybody's going to draft centers like they did ever before again, Dan, because paying these guys, I think they're looking for value at center because of Tyler Linderbaum is going to be the great challenge moving forwards now. Like, if I was the Seahawks, I'd be looking seriously at, can we find a way soon to get Jalen Sundell tied down so that he's on a cost-effective contract that rewards him somewhat for his development, because you're going to need some value there. And he's not somebody who's going to get $25 million a year, but he's also not going to be just that easy to replace. And the one position that's a question mark is right guard. And I know half the fans want Anthony Bradford run out of town. I think it's so freaking lazy how people have gone and found clips of Anthony Bradford, posted them online and gone, ha ha, look at this fool.
Mm-hmm.
Like, without giving him the respect of going out and finding the plays that he did very well in. There's a reason why the running backs, when they got into the end zone, were greeted by Anthony Bradford, who lifted them in the air. It was a show of respect. It was a show of trust and credit to Anthony Bradford that he was the lineman. A lot of teams do that, and it's typically like a point's being made there. And they were making a point for Anthony Bradford when he celebrated that way. So I don't think he's the problem. However, having said that, Dan, he's got 1 year left in his contract.
Yeah.
And he is certainly upgradable. And I wrote a piece yesterday about a player that, the Seahawks may come up to maybe 32, it may be 64, maybe 96. But at any of those positions, they might just look at their board and go, best player on our board by a miles, offensive lineman. And we ain't going to fight that. Like, and they shouldn't either. Like, there is absolutely nothing wrong with continuing to invest in your offensive line. And the player that I wrote about yesterday is very interesting for a number of reasons. Emmanuel Pregnon from Oregon, in terms of traits, zone grade. If you plug, I mean, the guy looks like an absolute machine. If you put him in at right guard and he ends up being this year's Gray's Able, you might have the best offensive line in the NFL.
Yeah, and locked up.
Like what we've all wanted.
Yep. Yeah.
We've all been asking for.
And what I found fascinating about that piece is that you pulled a couple of things out of a Brady Henderson piece recently. I think there was something else from another podcast of a pretty prominent person.
Lance Searling, he asked everybody. He asked everybody what position their team, what he should be thinking about for their team needs, and I gave him the typical list. Cornerback, pass rusher, running back. And he went, "That's interesting. I'm hearing interior offensive line is very much part of their plan."
Yeah.
So
that's interesting to me. And I've said about Pregnon, he kind of looks to me like if Anthony Bradford got in really good shape.
Yeah.
He kind of a similar build. He's a little lighter, obviously. In fact, I posted his RAS versus his and Pregnon's side by side. And, some of that stuff's based on size. And so Bradford actually was more athletic in some ways and in some explosive categories than Pregnon. But my point was simply that, he's still just 24 years old, turns 25 soon. And you want to go replace him with someone that you draft that has development ahead of him. But as much as we want to downgrade this draft class as a whole, interior offensive line is kind of sneaky deep.
Well, can I say, because the funny thing is Anthony Bradford's the same age as Emmanuel Pregnon.
Right.
But the difference is that if you want to keep Anthony Bradford, he's not going to cost $2.6 million, which Emmanuel Pregnon's going to cost. And like in his final year of his rookie deal, it'll be $4.6 million. That's great value for a guard, and you're quite right. Like Anthony Bradford, fantastic tester, like brilliant athlete. It's one of the reasons why they took him. Very explosive. Decent zone blocking grade, believe it or not, at LSU. Like there was a lot of things there that make him a fit. It's one of the reasons. That's the reasons why he's been given the opportunity to start. But he's out of contract in a year, and you're going to get, if you get a better, like you say, kind of slimmer, more refined, chiseled athletes in that position at a cost-effective price for the next 4 years, then. If we're talking about one contract players again, or, and that's a position whereby he probably could play until he's 33, 34 if he stays healthy. So he might be he might be, and this is why Pregnon should be heavily considered if he lasts to 32, is that he could be one of the few players who is a legit second contract player.
Yeah. On this list here, there's some intriguing names in your group for day 3 among guards. Chase Basantis, some people have much higher than you, but Keegan Trost has become one of my most intriguing prospects recently. He's got an interesting story. He's a 6-year guy, so he's a little bit older player. He's transferred a bunch, worked his way up levels, played 1 year at Missouri last year. He kind of fits into this category we were talking about earlier. Plays right tackle at Missouri, plays the whole season there as the starter. Top graded offensive lineman in the country per PFF. And I think he's 3rd or 4th overall among all offensive linemen in zone blocking grade. Can he play guard?
Yeah, he can. I think the thing with him is, let's start with the positives. Wins a lot of blocks with good angling. And there are so many linemen who struggle with their angles. So one of the players I've actually got in front of him, Jeremiah Wright, does everything well except he gets his angles wrong all the time. But Trost does that well, so he gets his body into the right position, very controlled movements to the second level. They enable him to hit the target consistently. That's why his zone blocking grade is second only to Emmanuel Pregnon. He is a real scrapper when he's on the move and loves to jostle with defenders. Not a lot of linemen do that. A lot of linemen can get out into space, but don't actually engage, or they just fall off the blocks as soon as they contact. They're not used to running in space. He's shown a lot of displacement ability. He will move defenders off the spot and sometimes send them to the ground, which is what you're looking for. He runs into the right areas at the second level to execute his blocks. That's an underrated aspect as well for zone blocking. There's a little bit pigeon-toed, which is a bit of a problem as well, because you can lose a lot of leverage and balance when you are in that kind of a stance. He lunges quite a bit, but he's lunging often to be the aggressor, which I don't mind as much. I think what I want to see with my offensive line is I want to see you play offense. Like, I don't want you to sit in your stance, especially in the running game, and then engage. I want you to be the one who's getting after the opponents. He was only Spencer Fano gave up fewer tackles for a loss, I think, or pressures in 2025. So he's got a lot going for him there. The problem is, and this is, I guess, hard to sort of quantify, Dan, in terms of what it means for his next level potential. When he was with his other teams, because he had 50 starts at Morgan State, Indiana State, Wake Forest, and Missouri. And when he was with those other 3 teams, he didn't do anything. Like, his run grades were crap for all of the seasons up until his season at Missouri. And then he turns up in Missouri and all of a sudden it clicks. So I guess it goes back to that 1 year wonder kind of answer again.
Mm-hmm.
How much is like Missouri's got a great reputation for players in the trenches, physical offensive linemen, physical defensive linemen, but they're flattered to deceive when they get to the NFL. This is going to be a problem with Zion Young as well. Like, they're very tough, they're very physical, they look good in the SEC, they come to the NFL, all of a sudden just being tough and physical ain't enough anymore. So there is part of me that wonders a little bit about that with him. But if you get to day 3 and you want to add somebody into the mix who has shown he can do some good zone blocking, he can do it, and he can play guard for me.
Another guard that I want to ask about, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on him, because you mentioned something in regards to Trost. I wrote it down, controlled movement. Don't judge me on my handwriting.
It's better than mine.
And then I see a guy like Jalen Farmer, who's one of the most fun guys for me to watch on tape. He is, I mean, we talk about motor a lot in regards to defensive players, but like as an offensive guard, his motor, like he's 100 miles an hour, he goes 100% all the time. But yet he's like the Tasmanian devil to me. The arms are all over the place. He's flailing, but man, he's violent and he's physical and he drives guys into the ground, and the pass protection, the numbers are okay. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think you've kind of summed it up pretty well. He's one of those players I find quite frustrating in that they flirt with, like, so he got like he had a 9.0 in the broad, but his vertical's not very good. And I kind of think, well, what does that mean? Like, are you explosive or are you not explosive? Because I want explosive offensive lineman, and that means good vertical, good broad. He is extremely violent and aggressive, and like that is a big tick for me when it comes to offensive lineman. I thought that he was really sort of stiff in his movements, and like if you want to get lateral, it's quite a challenge for him. And I think that if you are going to play with like violence as often as he is, there can be some issues sometimes. It always has to be with control, and I'm not sure with him it is always in control. And I just think when you look at other players, like I thought that Micah Morris was a more complete player than him, and I would consider Micah Morris to be quite raw. So that's why I had Micah Morris ahead of him on the board. I don't know if I'd be taking, from a Seahawks point of view, Jalen Farmer. I think I'd probably be looking at some. I'm a big fan of Carver Willis at the top of day 3. I think Jeremiah Wright has got, even though he's a bit of a plodder, he has got something about him and can just about fit in his own system. I like Trost. I like Morris. They're the ones in that kind of day 3 range that I would be looking at.
When you're grading guards and you see a guy that's played primarily, if not exclusively, left guard in college, projecting him to the right side, do you just assume he can make that and you try to evaluate him in a vacuum, or do you try to look for something in his movement skills or his traits that might suggest he could play on the right side? Because some linemen say that they just can't.
Yeah, I think first I'd do is I'll go and see if they've actually had some history of playing right guard in the past, so that it won't be a complete massive learning curve for them. So, for example, Emmanuel Pregnon had a game at right guard for Oregon against Minnesota in 2025, and he had a season playing left guard as well before he left to join USC. So he's played a full season at right guard. So that kind of makes me think, okay, he'll know what to expect. But I think you have to judge every case on its merit. That will be something I will be asking players if I was doing the combine meetings or the official meetings, whatever, because Damian Lewis in Seattle had an amazing rookie season at right guard. They bumped him over to left guard, and it was like huge, like he hit a brick wall, like for 2 years, and then he kind of had a good final season, and then parlayed that into a huge contract with the Panthers. But the Seahawks massively disrupted his development. Like, he could be playing for the Seahawks now at right guard, and if they'd kept him at right guard, but they moved him over because they just had to go and trade for an old veteran from the Raiders. So they messed things up there, and you can mess things up. I think a lot of the players that I'm kind of looking for are converted tackles anyway. And I think if you're moving a tackle from tackle to guard, they're going to have to learn anyway. So I'm not that concerned about moving those guys over, because they're going to have to change and adapt regardless.
Let's talk about some guys on the defensive side of the ball, that edge class. First of all, you're quite a bit lower, it seems like, on Derek Moore, who's become a fan favorite among Seahawk draft nerds, than most others. Why?
Tape's massively frustrating. Very inconsistent. Don't see enough sparkle there. Don't see great speed.
Kind of a one-trick pony when it comes to his pass rush, isn't he?
Yeah, very average for me. And then I was talking about this with Bryce earlier in the week. I love the Senior Bowl, Dan. I'm sure you feel very similarly. It's a great event. It's a bucket list thing for me to go 1 year. I will, as long as I'm still on planet Earth, 1 year.
For 27, because that's going to be a fun class.
Well, yeah. The problem is my daughter's birthday is slap bang in the middle of it. So, and she's only 9, so like it's kind of like, Daddy's going to the Senior Bowl. I will not be here for your birthday. It would be
the Senior Bowl is pretty open with credentials. They can get her one.
We're going to watch some offensive line, defensive line 1v1s.
Carry my bags.
That 10-year-old Sasha will not appreciate it. But the point I was making was that the players seem to have decided that if you can get one viral play out of the Senior Bowl and it trend on Twitter, then it's job done. And they all saw Mike Green push over an offensive lineman off balance last year. So they all think, well, I'll do that. I don't need to rush the edge. I don't need to get to the outside shoulder, rip through contact, bend the arc, straighten, all the stuff that Boya Mafe did to have a great Senior Bowl. I don't need to do any of that. All I need to do is run as fast as I can, head first into this offensive lineman on every single rep. And because I'm running at them and they're either backing off or standing still, I might be able to push this guy over, even though he weighs 300 pounds. And if that happens, I win the internet for the day. And I thought he did that. And a lot of people were like, yeah, look at this, amazing. Like, what a great rep and all of that. I'm thinking, come on, this is so easy to see through. And then I was kind of watching a few, and I didn't see it from any of the pass rushers in Mobile. Show me that sort of burst off the edge. So will somebody please freaking get to the outside shoulder and turn up for him back to the quarterback. Like, just do it for me. Like, everything's a freaking straight arm into the chest and pushing back and playing off that. Or it's I like speed to power. Everybody does. You need speed to power, but not in a 1v1 all of the time. Like, that's cheating. It's like asking the lineman to play with a hand behind the back all of the time. So Moore for me benefited a lot from the Senior Bowl fake news. And then I don't know what people are watching on tape to get excited about him. I think he's just my sort of, if I had to do a one-word review, it would be meh.
Okay. That sounds like a future episode. Just the meh board, right?
Yeah.
Now, the flip side of that, consequently, right, his teammate, Jayshon Barham, you're a little bit higher on than most. There are many who see him going kind of late third, maybe even slipping to day 3. You've got him in the second round range. He's built a little bit more like a stand-up outside linebacker, but he's got enough size, and he plays so violently. It's pretty easy to see a Mike McDonald player in there.
Yeah, the one thing I like about him is he very much is an outside linebacker type. Like, he's 3-man front. You either use him as a specialist, you use him as a Sam, you use him outside linebacker, and what you want him doing is you want him running forwards. Like, you want him attacking. When he's in attack mode versus the run, he is physical, fast, aggressive, and he gets people to the turf. So if you're also wanting to play him out there, in a wider position, getting after it, attacking that backfield, he can do a great job for you. And there were just enough flashes on tape because he is a converted linebacker. Like, this was his first year sort of being used as a pass rusher. The first half of last season, he looked really freaking good, to the point where you're thinking, what can this guy achieve? Like, he's a good combine away. I remember a good Senior Bowl from being a potential first round pick. And then just as I was starting to think that maybe it's my fault, he kind of disappeared for a few games, and you didn't notice as much. And you thought, okay, we have to sort of settle into the stock here. But there is potential there. And I think the absolute worst case scenario you are going to get from him is a really good run defending outside linebacker, specialist rusher edge type who can do a job there and just play with his hair on fire. The best is that you can bring out a bit more of the pass rush into him, and he can be a specialist for you, rushing the edge too. He is said to be a little bit reserved and a bit quiet. So I don't know how he fits into Seattle's kind of more vocal alpha locker room.
Yeah.
But I liked what I saw enough from him to think there's something to develop here.
And then you're the only one that I've seen to this point that likes Mason Rieger as much as I do. His tape is so fun. You talk about motor. I mean, this guy could be the poster child. But I want your thoughts on him as a whole. But also, at first, I was hesitant to kind of hitch my wagon to him because I've fallen for this with Wisconsin players before. Like, they just that's their culture. It's what they recruit and develop, is just, lunch pail, blue collar, meat and potatoes, just motor, hardworking guys. And sometimes they look better on tape in college than translates to the pros. But your thoughts on Rieger?
Well, what I wrote about him was, I put not a great speed rush. You're not going to see him sort of Olay past the tackle who wins with twitch. You're not going to get that. What you're going to get from him is, I am going to fight my arse off through contact and find a way. That's what I kind of kept seeing from him. It's not unusual when you're watching the tape to sort of just see him like pinballing like from one defender to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden he's there at the quarterback. Like, whereas like some players might just get caught up in the traffic. Like, he's kind of bouncing off people, and all of a sudden he gets home. His motor never stops. He has shown ability to use his hands to disengage and swipe away contact, which is underrated. And when you combine that with a split, which is very solid, 161 for 251 pounds, not an elite split, but it's a decent 10-yard split. And when you've got the hands to get off the contact there, he can get off his blocks. That's good. So you're not gonna turn on the tape and see high level bend and straight, and you're not going to see a ton of amazing speed to power. He does have a really wonderful swim move on an inside counter, and he can pair that with his quickness to win through. I just thought there was something there. His run defense I put is solid enough, but his effort's not anchor based. So that's a bit of a problem, because he does need to play with a bit more anchor there. I just think a very solid rotational piece. You could do a lot worse than him. And he's that kind of player, from these teams that he did transfer from Louisville. So he's not been at Wisconsin forever, but he's one of those players from the Big Ten that, ends up on a Pittsburgh or somebody like that. And then just in a few years' time, they're maybe not the next TJ Watt or anything like that, but they've ended up just being a really decent, solid player, and who's stick in the NFL. And I kind of think that he's that kind of player. He's going to stick in the NFL. He's going to have a role.
And then I want to talk about corners before we go, because I think everybody agrees they're going to add one in the draft. And as you can see, it's the second column over there from the right. You've only got 5 names. It's a little bit lighter, and one of them's in purple and one of them's in red, which means potential character concerns for Thaddeus Dixon and potential injury issues for Xavier Scott. The light number of players that you have in this box, more indicative of what's ahead of it, right? It's a pretty good class through the first 2 days.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Like, there's players that I've probably got rated higher that are going to end up going in probably in day 3 that I've got higher than this board than they will actually go in the draft, because I like the cornerbacks. I think I'm writing a piece later today, and I'm going to touch on this. Then I'll kind of share the content with you here. That's
exclusive.
Oh yeah. So I had a look. Like, I know that the NFL top 100 list is not it's not an exact science, is it? It's not like this is definitely, like, there's a lot of BS in it. Let's basically say. However, there were only 6 cornerbacks in the top 100 for the last time they did the list in 2025. So you've not got a lot of great cornerbacks in the NFL right now. And I think this is something that's been sort of a sneaky thing. Like we've gone through an era where there were a lot of good quarterbacks, and now teams are struggling to find them. And they are kind of, I think, picking for styles rather than necessarily raw talent. Now, the 6 players who were in the top 100 last year were drafted 9th overall, 3rd, 22nd, 5th, 21st, and 17th. So they were all. No, it's not who you think. Actually, that's not.
Really?
This is why the NFL list is crap, because it was actually Jalen Ramsey.
Okay.
Devin Witherspoon was not in the top 100 last year.
Thought he made it.
But I did include Devin Witherspoon in the notes to say that, you know, the highest graded PFF cornerback this year was Devin Witherspoon, who was the 5th overall pick. So basically, the point I'm making is that all of the players that were either in the top 100 list, or, you know, the top cornerback versus per PFF this year, it was a top 5 pick. Sauce Gardner was traded for 2 first-round picks. It was a 4th overall pick. You know, the only sort of what I would call really good cornerback in the NFL who wasn't a first-round pick is Kamari Lassiter. So, you know, someone who you would pay a big second contract to. Lassiter was the 42nd overall pick. So the kind of point I'm making here is, unless you're picking in the top 20, it's quite hard to find a cornerback worth taking. And I think what we will see is that all of the cornerbacks just last a bit longer than we're maybe expecting. So you'll get to 96. I think there'll be a cornerback there that they really like. So they might want to go cornerback first pick, but I would just say, don't be surprised if they don't. Like there's a lot of players on my board that I really like who could easily be there in the 2nd and 3rd round. And I think there are some really good fits for Mike McDonald's defense who people aren't talking about as much, who I think could be interesting for them on day 2.
And let's finish with this. If I were to ask you, and let's consider the 3rd round in this as well, because in this particular draft class, I think it's fair to qualify a sleeper as someone that might be available in the 3rd round. Is there a name we haven't mentioned yet, regardless of position, anywhere that you are just so convinced would be a really good fit in Seattle, not just from a physical standpoint, but also character and all the intangible fits that we haven't mentioned?
Well, there's a few. Carver Willis at Washington, you know, I think is absolutely destined to kick inside and be a tremendous guard. Good zone blocking. I would suggest if people want to go and see what he's all about, go and watch the game between Washington and Ohio State. I know for a fact that the tape of that is on YouTube. If you know where to look, you'll find it. So you can go and watch that. I think Keyshawn Elliott's a linebacker. I don't think they're going to draft a linebacker, but I think he's completely like a Seahawks type of player. Hezekiah Massas and Chandler Rivers are both tremendous zone coverage cornerbacks. They are, you know, for me, they're the players I've put a big ring around for the Seahawks to take a corner in day 2 if they don't take one with their first pick. I think DeJean Stribling, the former Washington State receiver who was at Ole Miss.
Well, I think he's a former lot of things.
He is.
He's also he played 4 schools, 5 schools. Yeah, he got around.
He's a freaking good player, though.
Yeah,
and really. His character, from what I've been told, his character is really good. So he's somebody who I've been really high on. He then had a great combine, and now a lot of people are talking about him. There's a lot of buzz about him at the Ole Miss Pro Day the other day. So he's another one. The thing is even in a bad draft, like I could probably spend the next 20 minutes talking about players that I really like, who kind of fit the Seahawks. It's hard for me to sort of come up with them off the top of my head as to who might fit. I mean, I do think that Logan Jones is a good option. Brian Parker, the offensive lineman. I think if you wanted to take a complete punt on somebody later on, it might focus of a bit of injury issue there and like a refinement. I think Anthony Lucas has got a bit of the body type of DeMarcus Lawrence to him.
Parker intrigued me because we know that this staff loves positional versatility on the offensive line, and this is a guy that can play all 5 spots almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so many players. I mean, there always is. Like somebody I know who again knows a lot more than I do. I mentioned one year that it looked like a bad draft, and he went, "There's no such." He was almost offended that I said that. Said, "There's no such thing as a bad draft. Like you've just got to find the good players in the bad draft."
I've said something similar in regards to this class. I think good organizations will find fits, and they'll develop them.
I think it's true to an extent. I think you can. I think you can both have a bad draft, But there are always, you've got to define what you think is like what is a great pick. In this draft, a great pick might be somebody who just helps you win another Super Bowl in the next 4 years, or helps you get back to the NFC Championship, or gets a second contract. I think that's the problem. Like, not everybody's going to be a franchise player. Like, sometimes it's just about who are your contributors. Boye Mafe and Ken Walker did not sign second contracts in Seattle, but nobody can deny they played a big role in Seattle winning a championship. And that's what we've got to have. That kind of perspective I think we have to have with these drafts.
Would you agree with this? Because this draft lacks premium position talent at the top, is it almost better to be drafting late this year?
That's a good question. Let me have a look at the last mock draft.
There's going to be some busts in the top 15 in this class.
I mean, if you said to me, are you better off picking 32nd than having a shot at Francis Mauigoa, Jeremiah Love, Caleb Downs, Spencer Fano, I'd probably say no. And there's always players in the teens. It's weird. Like, there's always like a couple of players in the teens who end up being really good. So there probably will be again this year. I think the problem with 32nd is I think you're probably just on the outside of like a little shelf, and then there's a drop, and then you're probably, the player that you take at 32 is probably not going to be any different than the player that you take, I would say, 40 to 41, and then there's another drop, and then it seems to be pretty consistent through to like the late 50s, and then there's another drop. So I don't think so. I mean, if you to give me the chance of picking in the top 10 now, I'd be very excited, because there are players who fit Seattle who,
once you name some of those names off, it puts a little different slant on it.
But I'll tell you though, Dan, I quite prefer picking 32nd overall for different reasons.
Indeed, for all the reasons, Rob. Right? We didn't even get a chance to talk about your experience at the Super Bowl, but I got to talk to your running mate, Jeff Simmons, about his experience earlier this week, and I know you guys hung out together. And in fact, I used one of your celebration pictures as a background a couple of times with the confetti. So
that was an amazing day. And here's to another one for the Seahawks next year. I don't think I'll be there next year, but hopefully the Seahawks are, and they can be winning another Super Bowl.
I'm just excited that they appear to be in line to contend for Super Bowls for quite some time, because I am now 0 for 4 lifetime in the season ticket holder Super Bowl lottery. And so maybe the fifth time will be the charm for me. I'll get some of those tickets and make that work. It's always good to have you on the show. Check out SeahawksDraftBlog.com if you haven't already. And if you haven't, you're doing it wrong. You'll also see some guest content over there. Curtis Allen, good friend of the show, is another guy who contributes at the Seahawks Draft Blog with a lot of his salary cap, in-depth insight and everything else. So really appreciate the work you do, Rob. Keep it up. Thanks. And I know the viewers are going to love having you on today. Thanks for taking the time. Yeah.
Can I just say before I go, everyone has to follow Curtis. Like, Curtis is an absolute beast.
Curtis,
and he's brilliant. So he's one of the best follows you can have as a Seahawks fan. So if you're not following on X, he's not got an obvious handle, has he? But go and find it, Curtis Allen, and you'll not regret it. So
yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll put it down in the description below so people can just click a mouse and find him. I'll pay him the highest compliment that I can pay to anyone. And this learned so much from Curtis Allen. I know so much more about the financial workings of an NFL front office and how contracts work and everything else now than I ever did before. And Curtis is a big reason for that. So thanks for the shout out. Thanks to all of you for watching and contributing and being here and everything else. Rob, until next time, forever and always go Hawks.
Yeah, go Hawks, Dan. Anytime.